The legalization, use, implications, and benefits of cannabis have undoubtedly been much debate and discussion in the U.S. over the last several years. Many political and pro-marijuana groups have fought tirelessly to inform Americans about the benefits of marijuana and its uses. Similarly, many opposition groups have debated the implications and social impacts of legalizing or allowing marijuana's use. For me, it's less about the medical benefits or the possible social impacts marijuana can have, but it's more about what regulations, restrictions, and enforcements of marijuana can we use as a society to improve on. Can we live in a world, a society, where we make rules and regulations for the benefit of all instead of a few? Can we develop a system where we allow responsible, law-abiding people to responsibly use a system or substance and at the same time strictly enforce and hold people accountable when they abuse their privileges? I believe more importantly than legalizing cannabis, we need to look at how it's governed, manage its access and sales, provide aid and support for the industry, and look at how we will regulate the punishments for those who violate or abuse its use. Marijuana, like alcohol, is extremely underregulated. I certainly do not mean in terms of how hard or how easy it is to get, but how we control its impacts. First, let's explore a known. Alcohol is a substance or drug, if you will, composed of mind-altering chemicals and properties. Alcohol abuse affects millions and millions of people each year. CDC data shows that approximately 88,000 people in the U.S. die annually from alcohol-related deaths. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, NHTSA, shows nearly 1/3 of all fatal motor vehicle accidents are alcohol-related. 2012 study by NHTSA showed that approximately 25% of Americans 18 or older have reported binge drinking within a month of the survey. The Bureau of Justice Statistics states that in 2002, 37% of all people incarcerated in state or federal prisons reported being under the influence of alcohol at the time they committed the crime. These facts and surveys statistics, I think it's easy to see that alcohol is an easily and commonly abused mind-altering substance, which plays a factor in deaths, crimes, motor vehicle accidents. Most importantly, this shows that being irresponsible with alcohol is a major issue to ourselves, our loved ones, our communities, and our societies. Some people say marijuana and alcohol are completely different, but how? Why? Marijuana is also undoubtedly a mind-altering substance. For many of the facts above are the same causative factors and reasons why opposition groups have fought so hard against the legalization of marijuana. Breaking down similar facts regarding marijuana show that concerns are legitimate. Same data from the CDC shows that marijuana users are approximately 25% more likely to be involved in a motor vehicle accident than drivers with no evidence of THC in their system. Researchers from Columbia University's Mailman School of Public Health concluded that marijuana use contributed to 12% of fatal motor vehicle accidents in 2010. 2002, 14% of federal and state inmates reported using marijuana immediately before or during the time of their offense. Although not all doctors or medical research groups agree, marijuana has been known to many as having a significant medical use. Massachusetts, for example, during the November 2016 election, voted to legalize recreational marijuana. Massachusetts, the decriminalization of marijuana and legalization of medical marijuana have previously already been in effect. However, the regulation of marijuana and its use, to include the way it will be manufactured, sold, regulated, and enforced, has yet to be figured out. And the problem goes beyond Massachusetts. The U.S. government identifies marijuana as having no legitimate medical use and that it has a high potential for abuse. If marijuana has such a high potential for abuse, and it has been proven to have a legitimate medical use, how is it that we would vote to legalize it without changing the necessary regulations? Would you build a building without first establishing blueprints or figuring out your budget or deciding upon the proper work crew? Looking back on the statistics from above, how different is marijuana and alcohol in relations to its social impacts. Alcohol is legalized, regulated, and widely abused. The laws and regulations for alcohol use and abuse are not working. I would argue that most of us know someone who alcohol abuse has affected, whether it be a victim of an alcohol-driven abusive family, a victim of driving under the influence, or a friend or family member who has abused alcohol. If we look at these facts, it's obvious we need to do a better job at regulating and enforcing the regulations for people who abuse alcohol and marijuana, or any mind-altering substance. The legalization of marijuana is not the problem. The under-enforcement, the mismanaged regulations are. Let's look at the sales. Many people argue that if you legalize marijuana and establish programs for its sales, people will be safer and less marijuana will be sold illegally with unknown chemicals. I don't agree. A dispensary with permits, taxes, and overhead costs is selling its marijuana at a higher price than anyone on the corner, meaning people in this day and age, with times of financial crisis, will still buy the marijuana on the corner at a cheaper price. In conclusion, I would argue that marijuana should be as legal as alcohol. However, both and any mind-altering substance that can and will be abused needs to have better enforcement and regulations. People abusing the substances are the problem, and the lack of regulation and enforcement only compound it. When we look at driving under the influence, DUIs, we can see the same problem. Some of these are habitual offenders. They have 1, 2, 3 DUIs, and their license finally gets suspended indefinitely. However, what happens when they get a 4th, 5th, and 6th DUI? Sometimes even more. Suspending their licenses doesn't stop them from driving. Just like telling them drinking and driving isn't legal doesn't stop them from getting behind the wheel. What cost needs to be paid before we, as a society, realize, instead of arguing about the positives to medical marijuana or the negatives to people abusing it, we need to focus on holding the people who abuse it more accountable and holding elected lawmaking officials responsible for developing effective regulations.